Hi everyone and welcome to Hostile Territory. In this video we'll be talking about should you report any of your colleagues, if you notice any kind of problem, to the head management in your company. This is a specific situation and in a good company it's more or less obvious, but in a toxic and hostile workplace you have to be very careful about what you're going to do in this situation. So stay tuned.
Hostile territory.
Now, what we're going to be talking about in this video is essentially a copy-paste video from one of our other videos where we talk about how to report problems to human relations in a toxic workplace. But when you're reporting something in a toxic and hostile workplace, it is very sensitive. You should be very careful about what you're doing. If you make a mistake, you can pay it dearly. So I guess this won't be bad as a reminder. It goes double because you're going to be talking to the head management, and that can be especially a slippery slope. The next thing is to know the management in your company. Just like with the human relations, it is immensely useful and important to know who you're actually reporting to and how they solve problems. Okay, we mentioned this in the human relations video. If you see that your head management is incapable of solving these kinds of problems, and if you see that they are people that don't like to address these kinds of situations and everything else, then it's logical not to report it at all. I'll mention an example from my previous company. The head management gave my boss unlimited power. The guy could do whatever he wanted within the branch office. It was essentially his. I had some serious problems with that boss, with his behavior, with the alcoholism, with the love affairs he had within the company and everything else. It affected work. And what do you think if I reported that to the head management in my company? If I made a mail and a report and I sent that to the head management, which is affectionate towards the boss, what would probably happen is that the head management would call my boss and say, yeah, what about this? Ha ha ha, that guy reported you. And the end result would be that I would get myself even into more trouble and probably lose my job in a very short period of time. So my point on this part here is be very careful who you report to. If you work in a good company, they will solve the problem for sure. But if you work in a toxic and hostile workplace, reporting to the wrong people may be your undoing. Now, the first and most important thing about this is to think twice when reporting something to the head management. Twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, it doesn't matter. Sit on it at least for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or a month perhaps, and then make the report if you have to. Exceptions from this would be if you see some financial problem, economic problem, or something that endangers you directly. For instance, your colleague makes a mistake, a serious mistake, and it's going to affect you financially, for instance, or you're going to get some serious reprimands for it, then you should report it right away. That would be an exception. But if you have some sort of report regarding human relations and someone's behavior in a toxic and hostile workplace, let it sit for a couple of days, weeks, or even a month, and see what happens. If you're still sure that you should report it, then report it after that period of time. Closely related to the previous thing I said is that you should think about the consequences of what you are doing. And this goes double and triple in a toxic and hostile workplace. If you work in a normal company, it is okay for you to, express your concern. If you see some trouble, it is morally okay to tell the head management that there is a problem. Again, especially if it regards a financial matter, if it hurts the company and everything else, in a good company, they will hear you and they will solve the problem. But in a toxic and hostile workplace, it will be probably the exact opposite. The consequences may be you getting even more work than you had before, getting even more excluded from your workplace than before. Your boss may even start to hassle you more than he or she did before, and the list goes on. All in all, you may get yourself in a much worse position than you already are. Consider this seriously before making any kind of report, especially if you're forced, like I was, to stay in that company for a longer period of time. Now, let's say you've decided to make the report. One thing that is very useful: be very precise about what your problem is. Is it a person? Is it human relations? Who, what, where, how? And if possible, bring evidence to the table. Is it some sort of technical problem? State that. Whatever the problem is, be precise. Be sure to avoid things like gossip, hearsay, your personal opinions and everything else, just avoid that. You can add your personal opinion later if some conversation were to start, if the head management calls you for some sort of conversation. But the main thing is to be precise about what's bothering you. Now, the final tip I have for you, and this is, again, you don't have to do it, but it's very useful. It's sort of sending bait in front of you to see what will happen. And especially do this if you don't know your management well. Try to send some sort of email or, find some sort of situation to see how the management solves certain problems. I'll state an example which I'm making up in my head. You have a software problem and the head of management is the only one who can solve it. It affects no one. It is just a software problem. And even if you have to sound stupid, ask about, I have a software problem regarding this and this, and send it to the head management and see how they solve it. How long does it take for them to respond? How long does it take for them to react, to the problem? How long does it take for them to solve the problem? What is the mechanism of their problem solving? Is there lots of kicking the ball into the other field, from this to that, go to that person, and so on? The point here is it will give you a good picture of how they solve problems. If you see that they are effective, that they listen, and that they do solve problems, which is the case in good companies, report as soon as possible. But if you see that they are bad in solving problems, that they do not react on time, that they want to push the problem under the rug as soon as possible, which is a very common thing in toxic and hostile workplaces, best do not report the problem at all. Now for the end of this video, the sad truth is this. In toxic and hostile workplaces, in most cases, you're going to see lots of things, lots of problems, lots of bad behavior, lots of things that may even affect the company, the work, and everything else. And the sad truth is you should not report it, especially if you think about leaving the company soon in the future. If you go on the moral trip, so to say, if you think that you're doing this for the benefit of the company, and everything else, soon you will see that that report will only hit you on the head like a big wooden plank. In a toxic and hostile workplace, reporting has only the opposite effect and it will only bring you trouble. So best do not make any kind of reports in a toxic and hostile workplace. If you want to make a report, know who you're reporting to. If you're reporting to people who are in good relations with each other, if the head management is good with the boss, if the boss is good with the head management, you are essentially digging your own grave. So best don't do it. But if you decide and the situation is such that you do want to make a report, be sure to keep your back against the wall and be sure that you have evidence for what you're saying and be sure that you don't make a fool out of yourself. So that's it for this time. I hope this video helps and I hope that the other videos you may have watched on this channel will help you get through a toxic and hostile workplace. I always like to say at the end of each video that working in a toxic and hostile workplace is a specific situation. It's a bad situation. There are things you should know in order to survive it and above all to save yourself and to save your health. I lost lots of health, lots of time and everything else making serious mistakes, and I hope these videos will help you avoid making the mistakes I did. Thank you for watching, thank you for your time, and if you have the will, watch our other videos.